Hey everybody, welcome to the very first episode of Arcane Station. I'm your host, Mike Porter, and I want to thank you for tuning in as we launch this journey into the strange, the mysterious, and the unexplained. Since this is our inaugural episode, I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself, share the influences that inspired this show, and talk about what you can expect from Arcane Station. And most importantly, why this podcast is going to be slightly different, or hopefully a great deal different than the rest of the other paranormal, supernatural podcasts. So a little bit about myself. I am currently a professor at a university on a master's thesis program where I teach video game development. Now, that sounds like it's a little bit frivolous, but it's not. You're thinking about topics and solving problems very deeply. And so one of the things that my students do and what I mentor them through is developing a hypothesis, doing some work in research to find out if that hypothesis is true or not, and then defending their stance on whether or not they were successful in understanding the depth of the topic. And so my goal here is to do the same thing. I'm going to look at each one of these topics, Bigfoot, the supernatural, things of that nature. I'm going to do a little bit of research on it. I'm going to form a hypothesis. I'm going to try to do deeper research, refine my topic parameters, and then come up with a defensible hypothesis, or a defensible thesis on what I think is going on, right? And I could be wrong, because this is the strange, the unusual, and the paranormal, and the unknown. And so this is just me trying to provide a framework around these things and do a little bit more research. Prior to being a professor, I made video games for almost 30 years now. I worked at my very first company in 1995, and it was Terminal Reality, and we worked on games, quite a few actually. I worked on 8 games in 5 years, but 2 of those games that I really enjoyed working on were horror related. I'm a big fan of horror, big fan of the supernatural and cryptids, and so one of those games was called Nocturne. And in that game, Nocturne, I was a environment artist, and I did write lore and embedded narrative and things of that nature to provide context for the program. The level that I was creating, I was providing myself context and how the animals or the supernatural elements functioned in this environment and how the player was going to interact in it. So Nocturne was great because it had vampires and it had like Frankenstein monsters in the form of a Chicago crime syndicate, patched together mobsters with Tommy guns, created in a Frankenstein factory in Chicago. That was loads of fun. The other thing that we had is sort of a cosmic horror flea that was underneath this town in Texas that was controlling the inhabitants and turning them into zombies. So we had like really far out there sort of supernatural elements, but it was great fun to work on. The second game that I worked on was Blair Witch Volume 1, the Rustin Parr tale, and basically what that was like a prequel to the Blair Witch movie. And so we described one of the inhabitants of Burkittsville, a guy named Rustin Parr, kind of went crazy and started like killing people. And there's a much deeper tale. There's actually 3 stories in these games. One by Terminal Reality, another one by Ritual Entertainment, and another one by Human Head, the guys who made Rune a long time ago. And so each one of these tales had a different section of history that they were trying to provide the story for. So Rustin Parr was relatively recent, so in the 60s or 70s. The Ellie Kedward tale was in the 1700s, and the third one, which was in the middle, actually, it was number 2. That one was set during the Civil War. So each one of these had little elements of supernatural, paranormal, demonic, witchcraft, all kinds of stuff. And it was loads of fun to work on. The other thing I do in my spare time when I'm not doing this is I am an artist and the owner of Cryptid Curiosities, and I'm going to spell this, and the website's changing. But when I first started this company, the website for Cryptid Curiosities was unavailable. And so I just dropped the I, so it's Cryptid, Curiosities, Cryptid Curiosities. I always made a joke about I'm not going to spend $5,000 to buy a vowel. Someone had parked this website, and so I decided to just get an alternative website. However, recently I was able to purchase the website, and so I'll be switching that over. But in the meantime, the name is incorrectly spelled, but correct in terms of what I was trying to accomplish. So on top of being a professor and a game artist and an entrepreneur, I started my own company in New Zealand. I was teaching at a university in New Zealand for about 10 years. And so done a little bit of teaching, a little bit of games, a little bit of art. And one of the things that I found that was really influential to me as a kid was reading a lot of books. I was very sick up until the age of, 16. I was sick all the time, and I spent a lot of time reading. And the other thing that I really enjoyed, especially in the 80s, was the movies. 60s, 70s, and 80s. The movies were fantastic. You had the things like Alien, Terminator, all these movies that have practical effects and practical miniatures that made it feel like there were real spaces, And growing up in that time frame, one of the things that took place during that, there were some movies and TV shows that were super influential to me. So one of the movies for my love of all things cryptid was The Legend of Boggy Creek. The other thing that was sort of like on the supernatural scale that I really enjoyed was In Search Of, that talked about cryptids and lost civilizations and things of that nature. But Kolchak the Night Stalker was so good. Darren McGavin was absolutely amazing in this show, and I think good TV like that is hard to come by these days. The other shows that I really loved over that time period were things like movies were Planet of the Apes, Friday the 13th, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So all these movies that talked about like weird sci-fi, supernatural. Poltergeist was another one. So lots of really good pop culture references from the 70s and 80s that helped influence my love of all things paranormal, supernatural, mysterious, and weird. So I decided to sort of take my love of these things and the understanding of how to apply sort of an academic framework around it and create this podcast. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what this podcast will be about and what it won't be about, and the topics I'm going to cover. And this is going to be a fairly short initial episode because I just want to run through these really quickly. But my goal is twice a week, at least 30 minutes of podcast to discuss a topic. And I'll try to shuffle the order of the topics that I'm going to be talking about unless the topic is so large that I have to use multiple sections of 30 minutes to fully work through the process of uncovering or unraveling what we're talking about. So the very first thing is I'm going to do research. So fact versus fiction. I'm not going to try to make things up or try to tell stories that aren't real or have AI generate anything for you. I'm going to look up as much as I can and get as much feedback and information as I can from a wide variety of sources, and then formulate a hypothesis around what I think happened and provide you with that defense of my research. And my hope is that you'll engage with that information and give me feedback and we can talk about it. Okay. The second thing is I'm not an expert in anything. I'm barely an expert at the subjects I teach because there's 18 million ways to make a video game, and this is just my frame of reference of how to do it. And so when we're talking about things like Bigfoot or quantum mechanics or any of that stuff, I'm not an expert in any of these things, and I will say that even though I'm not an expert, I'm well read, and I will go through and provide the context that I can provide. But I'm not going to BS you or sugarcoat or make up stuff. It's just going to be real hardcore looking into these things and seeing what I can understand about them, and then make some judgment calls based on that information. Now, the topics that we're planning to cover is wide and varied, and I want to go through them a little bit just to discuss what we're going to do and why we're doing it, okay? So, cryptids, monsters, and lore. Now, this is a no-brainer. Shows like Expedition Bigfoot and Finding Bigfoot and all that sort of stuff actually compels people, and even mountain monsters to a certain extent. That's my favorite. It's my favorite hillbilly soap opera. I really enjoy watching that show, and I think it's great. But I think, like cryptids and monsters and lore, that they're so ingrained in our culture, and they're from earlier indigenous peoples, that I think we really need to take a hard look at those things to see what's real, what's not, if there's any like mistaken identities or any of that stuff that could be attributed to these things. Having said that, I've gone to a bunch of Bigfoot events and stood face to face with people and talked about their experiences, so I know they've actually had an experience, and they're not trying to tell me a story or make me believe something that's not real. Like, in their heart of hearts, they believe what they saw, they know what they saw, and they're just giving me the information. And I really appreciate that. I want to handle that with the respect it deserves. Everyone's story is unique to them, and I think we need to have some respect around, like people calling bullshit on people just because they have a different opinion or a different context or a framework of reality is it's not a good place to start from. Not for the mentally and emotionally curious people out there that want to find out the truth of things, as opposed to just being told what to think, right? The next thing is the UFO and alien encounters, and I'll tell you this, like, over the years, I used to be super fascinated by it, and I've lost a little bit of my fascination with it, but I'm still going to look into it. And the reason is I think, there's so many of the government releasing information things, which is not really information. I've gotten a little bit tired of the talk about UFOs, but I'm going to continue to push into it and have conversations about it, because I do think there's obviously something there. What it is, I don't know. But we're going to look at different theories around it, and maybe we can come up with something that sounds reasonable, depending on your framework within, religion, culture, and all that other sort of things, right? There's loads of ancient religious texts that talk about UFOs in a variety of ways. So maybe it is a biblical sort of thing that we can have a conversation about, or some sort of form of religious experience that we could talk about. So conspiracies and secret societies. So I just talked about the cover-up conspiracy with UFOs, but we're going to go a little bit deeper into a bunch of different things. Again, I'm not going to tread any new ground here, but what I want to do is try to dig a little deeper. There's loads of people still talking about conspiracies around the JFK assassination, around Jimmy Hoffa, secret societies, the Denver airport. There's loads of crazy stuff. One of my favorites to talk about is New Schwabenland, which is in Antarctica. And in 1938, the Nazis went to Antarctica to set up a colony there called New Schwabenland, or New Schwabia. And so something happened there, and I would like to find out what that is. And I have some theories around it, but I think the more that we delve into these sorts of things and just game them out into what they could be, and then like find reasonable solutions to what they turned into, I think that's the best approach for these things. The other thing that I want to talk about is occult and esoterica, so things like witchcraft, ceremonial magic, tarot, alchemy, and astrology. I think there's a lot of misinformation and sort of persecution around these things, and I think there needs to be a conversation about what these are. There's some thoughts that that this is the true religion, and so we need to be respectful of their beliefs and their systems of understanding. And I think there's ways that we can look at that with an open mind and see where things come from and how they grow. So if you take a look at a lot of pagan ritual, time frames actually coincide with Christianity, and so we need to take a look at those frameworks and see why they were done that way. Was it a means of propagating people into a religion that we're already celebrating on that day, or is it something deeper? And we're going to take a look at those things as well. Fortean phenomena. So Fortean phenomena and strange natural phenomena, they could be the same thing, but I'm going to split those up, and I'll talk about why. So Fortean phenomena would be things like anomalous rains, like meat falling from the sky for some reason, or spontaneous human combustion. So there are strange scientific mysteries that science can't really explain, and so that's sort of the Fortean phenomena that I'm talking about. And those could be about natural phenomena, but also there's things that are outside the context of the natural phenomena that science, again, can't explain. Like spontaneous human combustion really doesn't make sense scientifically. Were they drinking alcohol? Why is their feet left, but the chair's fine, but everything else is disintegrated? Like some of that stuff makes no sense, right? So we're going to look into that as well. Lost civilizations, so Atlantis, Lemuria, Tartaria. There's lots of really interesting theories and conversations around stuff like the mud flood, and so I want to delve into those deeper, see what we can learn about those things. Like around the 1800s, almost every great city in the United States burned to the ground, and other things were built on top of it. And some people are saying, well, that was the previous that was the previous culture that had built those things, and in order to hide them, we had to do these strange things. And I'm not sure who they are and why they're doing it, but we're going to talk about those things as well. Psychic abilities and ESP. So one of the things that's really grown in prominence is over the last few years is Stranger Things, and the idea originating from the Montauk Project, where they were taking these kids and training them to use their psychic abilities. And I believe that there are elements of that active in the government, in covert operations and remote viewing and all that other stuff. So that's actually known that they use those things. So now let's see, how that works, what's real, what's not real, and those sorts of things. Time slips and alternate realities, like glitches in the Matrix and the Mandela effect. And, I look into the Mandela effect all the time because there's things that I remember as a kid that are not there anymore, or things that I don't remember from my childhood that are there now. So one of the great ones is the Sinbad as a genie in a movie. And I remember it vividly because I watched so many movies. I remember that happening, and there's nothing on it on the internet, right? They said it was not Sinbad, but it was Shaq, and completely different time periods, right? So like Sinbad was before Shaq, it was in the 80s. And so I remember vividly from the 80s a Sinbad movie where he was a genie. And so that's one of the Mandela effects that we're going to be talking about and diving into. Let's see, cursed objects in haunted places. Recently, there was this article about the person who was taking Annabelle on the nationwide tour suffered from a heart attack. Now, there's some people that are stating that's because of Annabelle, and others are like, no, it's just natural causes. And out of respect for that family, I think that needs to sit for a while before there's any conversation around those things further. But there's loads of people that are that feel like things are cursed, like Robert the Doll or paintings or something like that, right? So we're going to have a conversation about cursed items, what that means, how that might function, and what people can do about that, right? So if there is a curse on something, there could be a way of reversing that, even for your own benefit, as opposed to making you feel more secure in the fact that thing's no longer going to affect you in the way it will, the way it shouldn't. And so there's loads of information that we can kind of look into and see if that's the curse is an effective thing, something that works, and then how do you get rid of that if it does work, right? Mysterious disappearances and unsolved crimes. So one of the mysterious disappearances obviously is the the guy that stole the money from an airplane and jumped out of the airplane. I can't remember it off the top of my head. And there's also a senator who was flying an airplane and it vanished right over Alaska. And so there's lots of these unsolved mysteries, things like the 411, missing 411. What's going on with that? Let's take a look into those things and try to come up with some reasonable explanations. Particularly in the Alaska Triangle, there's a section of Alaska where most of the people that go missing in Alaska go missing in that region, and so maybe there's some like atmospheric or seismic or magnetic things that are going on there that may cause those problems and cause those disappearances to take place. Another one is miracles and religious mysteries, so things like stigmatas, weeping statues, apparitions of Mary, and in that I think is a subheading, demonology and angelology. So spiritual hierarchies and how those things are perceived and how they work out, right? And so let's talk about those things as well. And again, keeping an open mind, but also being respectful. I think we can have conversations around those spaces and not get judgmental about either side, whether you believe or don't, right? I just want to have conversations about how those things function in whatever culture that you have, and then let's have a conversation about it. So science, mysteries, and fringe science, so like ball lightning, which obviously happens. Again, spontaneous, not combustion, but evolution. Like, how did this animal decide to evolve? Why? And rapidly, what happened in that respect? Was there an introduction of something, virus, parasite, something like that caused that, or was it something else? And I want to have conversations about that. So modern urban legends and internet lore, I think that's really interesting, like SCP, like the back rooms and things like that, Slender Man. I think those are all really cool, like urban legends and internet lore, and I think that's a good conversation to have. Going deeper into those sorts of things would be loads of fun, especially like Slender Man. And I know there was some crimes associated with that, and 2 girls saying that they actually were told to do things by Slender Man, and that might be something that we talk about further on, things like in psychology and belief systems and mass hysteria. So the other thing we can talk about is psychology of belief and mass hysteria based on things like the modern urban legends. So you talk about the Slender Man. There was 2 girls that said that Slender Man actually told them to do something. And so is that part of a psychology of belief and a mass hysteria? So there's things like tulpa creation, and we can go deeper into that, like the 1970s. There was a college experiment where they created a ghost, and the ghost started interacting with them even though there was no ghost. And so was that just the manifestation of minds all working together to create something from nothing, or was there actually a spirit that was mimicking this identity of a spirit that they created, right? So also during the 80s, I remember growing up, I was playing D&D, and there was the satanic panic where they thought that D&D was ritualistic magic, and they were afraid that people were going to kill each other based on, playing D&D. And there was a horrible movie called Monsters and Mazes back in the 80s, and if you watch that movie, you'll understand how the satanic panic sort of manifested itself in the 80s. Another thing to look into, and I think this would be interesting, is dreams, lucid dreaming, and astral projection. Because you hear people talking about like a golden thread coming from their belly button that they're attached to, and they're tethered to their body, and then they can return through that tether. I think that's an interesting concept to talk about. And I don't know if that's like a mental manifestation or if it's a spiritual manifestation. And I think that's something that would be interesting to look into further. Another one that's kind of weird is bizarre deaths and afterlife experiences. So near-death experiences, reincarnation stories, past life regression. And you hear really interesting stories about kids that say that they were an Egyptian person, or they were, or they suddenly start speaking Russian when they've never taken Russian in their lives. So I think those are some really cool things to look into. But also with the bizarre deaths, there's just there was a book of strange deaths, which I hope I can find again, that just had like really bizarre ways in which people died, which is horrible to laugh at, but some of them are quite unfortunate and humorous, and in antiquity. So we're not thinking about someone in recent times, and so we could take a look at those things as well. And then something that I'm really interested in, because I grew up in this space, is paranormal pop culture. So movies, books, games, and their influence on beliefs, right? And so having played these games growing up, Doom, Quake, horror games, watching horror movies, slasher movies, how come I didn't, well, okay. How come I didn't grow up super weird? I know I'm weird, but how come I didn't grow up super weird because of all of that influence? The books that I read, the movies I watched, the games I played. If it was all, contributing to my delinquency, then I should have had a more adverse effect with the amount of media I was consuming. So that's the sort of things that we're going to be talking about. And we may expand upon those, but that's my current listing of sort of where I want to go and what I want to do. Now, the website, I'm going to make some changes to it as I move forward, but ideally the thing is going to be just the way it is now. Episodes, contact, about us, and then news articles. I may add some other stuff later on, but if you look in the about us, there should be an event calendar, and that's going to be showing where we'll be, displaying our wares for Cryptic Curiosities, or we may be talking about the podcast, right? So I'll have some events posted on there. And then also, if you have events that you would like to post, if you are an event organizer or you're going to an event, you want others to know about that, so you can, as a vendor, sell more items, or as a patron, be involved with more conversations with people, send me the event and I'll vet it to make sure that it's not appropriate, but make sure that it's an actual event, and then I'll post it on the calendar, and then that way everyone will have access to it. I'll have reviews, so there will be things like book reviews, game reviews, movie reviews, and documentaries. And so I'm going to have a review section, which is not there now. I have a news section currently, which is going to be articles written by me, but also stories from the news. So there'll be a section that is written by me, that's not part of the blog, not part of the podcast, just a news article that I found interesting that may be tangential to the conversation that we're having, and it just be a short write-up, and it may be my initial thoughts on how I would approach podcasting it, or where I should go with more research. And then articles, I also may just open up to other people writing articles as well, as long as they're doing it in the same fashion, like doing the due diligence, doing the research, having a defensible, even if it's incorrect, you can still defend the incorrect idea, but having an idea that you can defend, and doing the due diligence around trying to understand the topic more fully, right? Then that article would be really good to have as part of the postings of all the rest of the articles. And then the episodes, my plan is to do 30 minutes twice a week. So I don't have a schedule yet on which days that's going to be, but 30 minutes twice a week. And I'm going to shuffle the topics, so it's not going to be a series of the same things over and over again. One day it might be, the supernatural. Another day it might be UFOs. Another day it might be pop culture. So I'm going to try to manage those in a way that keeps it fresh. Now, if there is a topic that needs more refinement or more information, that may become a series of 30-minute podcast spots that will be in sequence. But otherwise, I'm planning on doing everything in a shuffled fashion, so it stays up to date and fresh, and a new topic two new topics every week. My apologies. And we'll make sure that that information that goes out to you is interesting and well researched. Okay, well, I think I've talked enough in this initial podcast, so What I'd invite you to do, if you did enjoy this episode, please use the star rating system. Below the episode, there's a little slider with stars. You can rate it in that way. Subscribe, leave a review, or reach out to us and let us know what you think. I want to hear your stories, your theories, and what you would like to see covered in the future. And thank you so much for listening. Welcome to the Arcane Station.